This is Jerry Coleman, play-by-play voice of the Dothan High Wolves on 96.9 The Legend, and you're tuned into the Phillip Jordan podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome in to the Phillip Jordan podcast. I am your host, Phillip Jordan, in-studio host and producer of Dozen Woods Football on 96.9 The Legend and Auburn Rider for Last Word on college football. Got a fun show planned for you guys today. We'll get some quick thoughts on what we saw in college football this past week in week 3, and two great guests. We're talking to Ryan Sylvia Vols for VolReport.com, part of the Rivals Network for the Tennessee Volunteers. We'll talk about the Tennessee Volunteers 3-0 start. We'll talk about Nico and a great quarterback play from him so far, the Tennessee defense, and look ahead to their big matchup this Saturday with the Oklahoma Sooners in SEC play. And also Tony Tsoukalas, the managing editor for TideIllustrated. He will be on. I'll also talk about Alabama's 3-0 start, their win against Wisconsin, and hey, we'll look a week and a half ahead when Alabama will meet Georgia at home, which will be a big game on the 28th. But, of course, we got the games this weekend. But still, I had Tony here. We had to talk about that matchup. So we'll talk about all that and more on this edition of the Phillip Jordan podcast. You can check out the Phillip Jordan podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you leave just 4 stars, you're just a straight-up hater. You can also email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com. Check out the show over at Wiregrass Daily News and watch the show over at the Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. All right, so let's jump into it real quickly. So the two interviews combined go like 45 minutes, so I'm not going to stay too long with this. Just a couple thoughts from over the weekend. Not going to get much in Alabama, Wisconsin here because we get into that with Tony, but I will say this: impressive win by Alabama, 42-10. Yes, a lot of people had them beating Wisconsin. Them beating Wisconsin is not a shocker. But going up there, it's an 11 a.m. game on the road. You just didn't play great against South Florida. You pulled away late with some big plays, but still, you didn't play your best game against South Florida. Alabama, they had all 5 of their starting offensive linemen back. The run game was there. They did great with Jalen Milroe in the pass game, explosive plays, defense played well. Look, Van Dyke getting hurt, quarterback there for Wisconsin. Wouldn't have mattered. Alabama was going to probably roll in this game anyways, but it just go up north, go on the road, take care of business, come back home. You're off a week, and then you get ready for the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, Auburn and New Mexico. Now, get into this one a little bit more than probably what you might think because I cover this team. And, of course, the big storyline for the Auburn Tigers taking on the New Mexico Lobos was Hank Brown starting. Now, obviously, the week before against Cal, Auburn loses 21-14. A lot of fans were wanting to change a quarterback, and Peyton Thorne just did not play well in the game. Threw 4 interceptions. I'm not going to put everything on him. The defense didn't help out. I think play calling also did not help out against Cal, but still, Auburn fans were looking for a change. And they got it with Hank Brown getting the start against New Mexico. And he played well in his first ever start. And there's a lot of stuff you can take from say, okay, we can build on this. 17-25, 235 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interception in the game. And that was key. Now, there was a couple passes. He came close to it, but still, in the day, he didn't throw any interceptions. Auburn got the run game going. Jarquez Hunter. Overall, the team had 268 yards rushing. Jarquez had 152. You did get 80 from Damari Alston. Cam Coleman didn't play the game, but they're really finding some good things with Keandre Lambert-Smith. I think this was the most we've noticed in the first 3 games from Rivaldo Fairweather. So, offensively, it played well. We saw some good things in the 45-19 win from Hank Brown. I think one of the big problems with Peyton Thorne is he waits for the receiver to get open, and you need to anticipate that. I don't think he always anticipated pressure, blitzes coming after it. I think Hank Brown did a much better job than what Peyton Thorne was doing at the line of scrimmage, recognizing those things and also not being indecisive. just making a decision, be confident in that decision with the football, delivering the football. I think he did well, looked like he did well in the RPO game. So that's kind of like the positives we saw with Hank Brown. Now, I know people say, well, they're playing a New Mexico team that's now 0-3. I know that. But first start, redshirt freshman, he played well. He showed some good things. And I like how Auburn really made an effort to run the ball and give him that. That's a big thing when you have an inexperienced young quarterback making their very first start, as he is. Obviously, this weekend, they're back at home again, at home the next 2 weeks before they hit their first road game of the year. They're playing Arkansas, much better team. We'll see that growth. See, and he's probably going to make some mistakes. Look, it's probably going to happen this Saturday. But how does he respond now? But I also want to say this: the Auburn defense, once again, in the first half, had some issues. The quarterback there for New Mexico, Devin Dampier, he was 22 of 44, 291. He did throw one touchdown. He threw 2 interceptions in the game. They had a decent running game going, 157. Again, like against Cal. First half against Cal was 7 of 10 on third down. Their quarterback Mendoza was 19 of 21, 200 yards passing. They just couldn't get anything on them. I saw a lot from the Auburn secondary, busted assignments in the secondary, or maybe looking into the backfield when he was running. Because look, their quarterback in New Mexico is a scrambler. He has that running ability. I saw that a couple of times at Auburn, and that was kind of concerning there too. The discipline was not there defensively too, and they did just, busted coverage. But now in the second half, they played much better. They only gave up 6 points there in the entire second half. It was 17-13 going into halftime. The Auburn offense did what they need to do in the second half, and then the defense played better. But they're going to do better against Arkansas and then against Oklahoma. So we'll see. Good things can still go for Auburn, we'll see how Hank Brown progresses this week. Troy lost to Iowa. I know a lot of people say, "What are you talking about, Troy?" Well, I'm right here in my backyard, and we're here at Wiregrass Daily News. Look, they lost. I figured they was going to get beat by Iowa, but I say moving forward, Troy, get the ball to Devontae Ross. He had 3 touchdowns in the game, 2 long pass plays, and a return. If you're Troy, Coach Parker, get Ross the football. Look, we know it's going on Florida State. They need to make quarterback change. DJU's not the guy. That's the biggest mistake by Mike Norvell. And looking at their schedule, they're playing Cal this week. Can they beat Cal? I don't know. We'll find out. It's going to be tough. Just going around some SEC stuff over the weekend. We're going to do this real quick as I get to the interviews and try to keep the show under an hour or two. Georgia and Kentucky. I think Kentucky did a good job defensively bothering Carson Beck. He only threw for 160 in the game. They limited the Georgia run game. The Kentucky offense, though, just not enough points. I was keeping an eye on this game. I was watching the Auburn game at the time this going on. I went back, caught up on what happened with Kentucky and Georgia. Kentucky's kicking field goals. You got to score touchdowns to beat Georgia. I just felt like, okay, they're going to keep kicking these field goals. Georgia's going to score a touchdown somewhere in this game, and Georgia has not given up a touchdown this year. Texas beating UTSA. Of course, we talked about this game last week. The only thing I'm going to talk about here, we need to slow it down on the Arch Manning Heisman talk. He played well, 9 of 12, 223, 4 touchdowns when Quinn Ewers went down with injury, but let's just hold off on the Heisman talk with him. Missouri and Boston College. Boston College loses this one 27-21 to the SEC's Missouri Tigers. When I say Boston College, I think they're a well-coached team with Bill O'Brien. A big question I have from Missouri coming in was their run game. How would it be? Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll, really good here. Noel had 121. He's the App State transfer. And then Marcus Carroll with 57 from Georgia State. So if they get that running game going, that was my worry. Can they replace Cody Schrader? But right now it seems like they're doing so. LSU and South Carolina was the game of the day in the conference, and one of the best games of college football this past weekend. 36-33. South Carolina's a lot better than I thought. They were up 17-0, and then LSU made a push. They come back, which I get a lot of respect for LSU for that too, not falling back like maybe past LSU teams would have. And they kept fighting, and they made this a game. Lenore Sellers, the quarterback there for South Carolina, when he went out with injury, I think it changed things for them offensively. Robbie Ashford, obviously, people who follow Auburn know this guy is not a passing quarterback. He's just not. It's limited what he can do in the pass game. He's a great runner. Rocket Sanders, big game, 143. They really should have fed him a lot more. But Nussmeier was good, 285, 2 touchdowns. They found a little something in the running game with Caden Durham with 98 yards. I wonder with John Emery getting hurt, where they find some of their ground game. Looks like they did so there. He had 2 touchdowns. Then A&M beat Florida 33-20, 20 at 0 halftime. I watched a good chunk of this game. Florida it was not as close as that score was. It was 33-7 at one point in this game. I say go DJ Lagway rest of the way for Florida, but it just feels like we're getting closer to Billy Napier. Probably not being the head coach of Florida much longer. It's going to be interesting with them in Florida State. What's going on? When does Florida get their second win? They play Mississippi State this week, who got blown out by Toledo, and then of course Florida State's playing Cal this week, who beat Auburn. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting week forward, to say the least. All right, I'm going to take a 1-minute break, and then we'll come back. I am going to be joined by Ryan Sylvia, where we will talk about some Tennessee Volunteers football right here on the Phillip Jordan Podcast.
96.9 The Legend is your connection to classic country legends. But Digio Strategies has other options too. News Talk 103.9 is your source for America's top news and entertainment shows, like Rick and Bubba in the morning, Glenn Beck from 9 till 11 a.m., and Clay Travis and Buck Sexton middays from 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. Sean Hannity, Lars Larson, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, and others fill your day with the latest news and views from America's top conservative voices. America at Night and Coast to Coast AM keep you company and connected throughout the night. Plus, Fox News, the Alabama Radio Network, and Wiregrass Daily News keep you informed with national, international, state, and local news. And with more musical choices like All the Hits 106.7 KMX, Today's Country 95.5 WTVY, and Music 107.7, Digio Strategies gives you more choices and more variety. Listen on air, online, and on our apps. 96.9 The Legend is just the beginning.
Everybody, my first guest this week, we're going to head up to Knoxville. We're going to talk about the Tennessee Volunteers, and join me to do so. You can catch all his work over at thevolreport.com, part of Rivals. Ryan Sylvia. And Ryan, I appreciate you coming on to talk about the 3-0 Tennessee Volunteers.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's SEC football time. We're finally in SEC play, so it's a fun time to talk about football.
I know how weird is it saying that though? The Tennessee-Oklahoma matchup is Tennessee's SEC opener. It's still weird that when I'm looking at these scores, I'm thinking, oh yes, Oklahoma, Texas being in the SEC.
Yeah, I was talking to an Oklahoma writer earlier today, and he said something about Oklahoma having this as one of the better in the SEC or something along those lines. And for a second, I was like, in the SEC? Oh yeah, I guess they are in the SEC. It still just takes a second to kind of connect the dots that, yeah, Oklahoma and Texas, it's officially here. And both of them are about to officially kind of get inducted into the SEC with their first games. And for Oklahoma, I mean, that's not an easy one to come out of the gates, and you get a Tennessee team that looks really good.
Yeah, a lot of enthusiasm around Tennessee Volunteers right now. 3-0 to start the season, and a lot of people talking about the SEC going to the season. Obviously, had the normal teams: Georgia, Texas, Alabama, maybe Ole Miss, Missouri, and LSU's names thrown out there. For you, what were your expectations for this team coming into the year?
Going into the year, I think most people were between 10-2, 9-3, and I was in the 9-3 boat. And part of that was because I thought that NC State team would be better than they were, and I thought that maybe that could be a game that you slip up in early in the season. We'll see how Nico looks and things like that. And then this Oklahoma game as well, I thought, well, even if you beat this NC State team, that's a tough road opener to have. And Josh Heupel's return and their first SEC game, it's obviously going to be a juiced-up crowd in Norman. So I thought, okay, well, maybe that could be a tough game. But you're sitting here right now going into the year thinking 9-3, and the way Tennessee's looked through 3 games, I mean, going into the Kent State game last week, I changed it to 10-2, and you could convince me at 11-1, and with the way that Georgia looked against Kentucky, I mean, who knows what the ceiling really is for this Tennessee team if they can keep playing at this level against tough competition. But yeah, I mean, they've already exceeded my expectations, and as of now, it's hard to almost see not only 9 wins and not 10.
Yeah, I know going into the year when I looked at that week 2 matchup with NC State, so that should be interesting. NC State's got Grayson McCall at quarterback, which I now think he probably wishes he was back at Coastal Carolina after what happened in that one. But talking about Nico, and of course he played in the bowl game last year. and just overall for him, in your opinion, like going into the off season, how important and big was that for him to have that experience going through that instead of, okay, this year would have been his first games?
I do think that was a big deal because if not, you're going into the NC State game and really the only start you have under your belt is against Chattanooga. And you're going into this Oklahoma game, then the only start against a good opponent is against NC State. So being able to say, okay, Nico's played a full game against one of the better defenses in the country in Iowa and then played well in it, I think did go a long way this offseason. I think it gives you confidence this offseason in his abilities and what you can do this season because you've seen it on film, you've seen what he can do. And it's not like he was throwing the ball over the field in that game, but you saw the flashes. You saw him escape the pocket and hit players downfield. You saw the ability he has to use his legs and score multiple touchdowns running the ball as well as throwing the ball, which we saw against UConn and then early this season. So I do think that having not only a game under your belt against Iowa, but a really positive game was a big deal. And it certainly helps when you're looking at the transfer portal and you're looking at guys that they bring in. And I'm not saying any one of these specific guys that was the lone reason is because Nico looked good as that they came here, but you've got to think it helps. 5-star Lance Hurd at left tackle, wide receiver Chris Brazzell from Tulane. You got to think those guys maybe in the back of their mind, it's like, well, I do want to play with an elite quarterback. And so far it looks like Nico's that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, see, and he wins, didn't throw interception in the game. And then as Josh Heupel goes, okay, I know what I have. It's his first game that he started, full game played. And then you kind of get an idea what you need to work on. Of course, inexperience is obviously there, but still, that's a great advantage for coach. I honestly, if I'm a team in a bowl game now, if I got a quarterback that I'm thinking next year's going to be the guy, I'd go ahead and just play him in a bowl game, just like that. I mean, I think it's a great thing to do in the bowl game, and obviously Tennessee is getting, reaping the benefits.
And that's what Tennessee did the year prior too. When you look at 22, which I mean, it is different because Hendon Hooker obviously tore his ACL, so he's not able to play in that bowl game. But you also got to see Joe Milton kind of build off the end of that season. He had a really nice Orange Bowl, and maybe 23, it maybe set up some expectations that he didn't reach, but it was still really positive for Tennessee to go into an Orange Bowl against Clemson and have what at the time was the backup quarterback, but presumed starter next year, have a really nice performance. So I agree. If you're not in a bowl game these days that's in the college football playoffs and you got some young guys you want to see out there, I mean, let's say Florida makes a bowl game this year. I don't think anyone thinks they will, but let's say they do. Graham Mertz isn't starting that bowl game. It's going to be DJ Lagway.
Yeah, we weren't playing Talk Florida, but I would go with DJ Lagway rest of the season if I was Florida, just to see what you got. And if Billy Napier wants to save his job, if maybe you go 6-6 with him versus Mertz, it's okay. Maybe we can keep you another year. But back on Nico, so far this year, 698 yards, 72% of completion, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Only sacked once. Offensive line's playing great for Tennessee so far the first 3 games. Well, what have you seen him kind of in his growth where, you kind of see him getting better every week?
I think it's just really like kind of the basic command of the offense. And Tennessee, it's a unique offense. It's obviously got the really fast pace. But what they're asking from their quarterbacks isn't to do anything crazy. It's just to command what they want them to do at a really high level. Mm-hmm. And you could see him kind of maybe the offense slow down a little bit the first year he was in the system. And that's really normal. And that's what's expected for a young quarterback or a new quarterback under Josh Heupel is you're not going to be able to go rocket speed immediately. This year, you've seen that pickup. You've seen the pace of play pickup. You've seen him identify defenses and be able to call himself different protections and slide the offensive line or audible something and slow down when he needs to or go faster. It's just he looks the part of the Tennessee football quarterback that has a full grasp of what Josh Heupel and this team wants to do. And in turn, I think that's opened up the playbook. You've seen Tennessee go to the middle of the field a lot more through the air. You've seen a lot more trust in his arm to make plays, make throws, and then to make the right decision. So this offseason, I don't think a lot of it was like, all right, we need to work on this footwork or this technique. I think a lot of it was getting comfortable with the mental side of it, getting comfortable with commanding the offense. And I think that's why, on top of the obvious physical skill set that he had when he arrived on campus and that he probably had when he was already like 16 years old and getting ranked a 5-star quarterback, once that's now been mixed in with some experience, I think that's why we're starting to see him in the Heisman conversations.
And it helps having Dylan Sampson at running back.
Yeah.
That's another one. And looking at because last year Tennessee had like a three-headed monster at running back. Along with you had Jalen Wright, who had over 1,000 yards, and you had Jabari Small in there as well, along with Dylan Sampson. But he's really taken control, being the lead back with his team, 357, 7.9 yards per carry, so almost a first down when he touches the ball, and already 9 touchdowns through 3 games. It kind of like the same as a Nico question, I guess. We see with him now kind of taking that role as the lead back for this team.
Yeah, Dylan Sampson is criminally under-talked about throughout the national media right now. The tear that he's been on in 3 games, and not even really in 3 halves, because Tennessee's been up so much, they haven't needed him to play in the second half. And any of the 3 games has been incredible to watch. I mean, he's halfway to the program record for rushing touchdowns in a season through 3 games at 9. The record is only 18. He already has 9. And part of that is, you're punching it at the 1-yard line. That's part of it. But you mentioned like the yards per carry. It's almost a first down every time he touches the ball. And sure, it's Chattanooga. And sure, it's Kent State. But he's doing that against NC State. And part of that also is NC State's playing a 3-man front and dropping back and trying to take Nico out of the game. But the run game is really pivotal in what Josh Heupel wants to do. It opens up the pass game, so you need a good running back. And so far, Dylan Sampson looks like maybe the best running back in the SEC. Like, he looks like a guy that could play in the NFL at a really high level. He's got speed. He's got instincts. He's physical when he needs to be. He's much improved as a pass blocker and pass protection. He's really the total package right now for Tennessee, and he's carrying a large load as well. And that's what's different between this year's Tennessee run game and run games of the past. You mentioned the 3-headed monster. It really was Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson. Let's see who has the hot hand, and let's ride them, but we're still going to get a rotation in. Through 3 games, these first few drives and really like the first quarter, it's all Dylan Sampson. There's no rotate who has the hot hand. It's all right, it's Dylan Sampson's offense, and he's ready to roll. And I think that's been the difference for him this offseason, is really taking command of the room. He's only a junior, like a true junior, but he's by far the most experienced guy in that room. It's a lot of freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores. So he's really taken control of that room as a leader. He's probably the most outspoken leader on the team in general. And you can tell it really meant something to him to be the feature back in this offense.
Yeah, and when you look at what they have on the outside, the talent, at that point, and then now when you're Josh Heupel and the offensive line is playing well, you got a good quarterback, you can run the ball. Really, now it's not, the defense is not going to dictate to you what you are going to do. You're dictating what the defense is going to do. And like you mentioned, down the road, playing a team like Georgia, which, we all know the talent they have every year on defense, that's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm not trying to jump ahead of the Oklahoma game. I'm just looking ahead at some other opponents they've got. When you've got both of those ingredients, it's hard to stop, because then it's like defense. Okay, do I stop their pass or stop their run? Tennessee's got both, so it's going to make them dangerous down the road.
No, you're right, and that is what makes Tennessee kind of such a lethal offense. Is that NC State game was the perfect example. Tennessee, they like to run the ball. They like that. That's kind of a common misconception, is that they're this air raid pass only team. It is a team that likes to run the ball. But NC State said, okay, we're not going to let Nico beat us. And Tennessee said, cool, we're going to play 12 personnel. We're going to put 2 tight ends on the field, and we're going to run it down your throat. And there was nothing NC State could do about it. And if they did decide halfway through that game that they wanted to pivot, I can guarantee Tennessee would have said, cool, 11 personnel, a 10 personnel package they just debuted against Kent State that now they want to try to use somewhat. They would jump into one of those, and they would beat you through the air. And that's what's really impressive about Tennessee. It was what worked so well in 22, and it's what's probably going to continue to work really well in 24, is that they can beat you in so many different ways. They're going to take what you give them, and they're just going to exploit it. And sometimes they're going to play their weakness against your strength. Like, let's say you're dropping back. Well, Nico's still going to hit some guys down the field. So it really is a complete offense this year.
Yeah, and then of course we flip it. Their defense. A lot of people are talking about the Tennessee defense. We want to talk about Nico, what the offense is doing. This is a good group. They were a good group last year. I think probably one of the more underrated groups last year. I think, what was it? 6 games they held teams under 14 points. I mean, and we don't talk about it a lot. Of course, everybody talks about James Pierce. We know he's going to be a top 10, maybe the first pick in the draft next year. What have you seen in these first 3 games? And NC State's a great example of how dominant their defense can be. But what have you seen that's really about this defense that's really stood out to you this year so far?
It's the defensive line as a whole. And James Pierce, you're right, he's the poster child of it. But they play 12 guys a game on the defensive front, and they feel good about all 12. And there really doesn't feel like too much of a drop-off when they start getting that kind of third rotation. And it's a 4-man front, so they'll do kind of the hockey line substitutions where You got the 4. Okay, offense is subbing out a guy. Let's get our next 4 in. Offense subs out another guy. Let's take your time, get those next 4 defensive linemen in. So at the end of the game, you're looking at the snap counts, and it's like, all right, well, every defensive lineman, all 12, have like 20 to 25 snaps. And when you have that much depth that you don't feel the drop off when you're at your 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th guys, that's what makes the difference, because that offensive line's not substituting. They're playing every snap. Now you have James Pierce Jr., who's rested, and it's like it's his first snap of the game. Meanwhile, you're playing deep in the second quarter, third quarter. You're gassed on the offensive line as a left, right tackle, and now James Pierce Jr. is coming off the edge. That's a big deal, and that's part of the reason that Tennessee's defensive line could be considered one of the best in the country, and I think has a really strong case to be the best defensive line in the country is because of that depth. And James Pierce Jr., but Tyree West, a defensive end, he's not even the starter right now, technically. He's the second guy at defensive end behind Dominic Bailey. He has been a wrecking ball through 3 games and just absolutely tormented defenses. And I think that's kind of, or tormented offenses, but I think that's kind of been a prime example of what Tennessee's been able to do on the defensive line is, all right, James Pierce is out of the game. We can catch our breath. Not so fast, because now you have a guy like Tyree West who's coming in and playing at just that high of a level.
Yeah, to me, that's always, especially in college football, the difference between the great defenses and good defense. Because I think, especially in the SEC, most teams have a good starting defensive line. I mean, that's kind of a given for most teams in the conference. But then when you have, like you said, that second and that third wave of guys, but then those starters, they're getting out rest because come fourth quarter, they're not going to have hands on hips. They're going to be ready to go and get after your quarterback when obviously we know you're throwing a ball. So that, I think that always separates the great teams from the good teams.
I agree. And that's what maybe gives you a little bit of pause about Tennessee is the secondary, and there's not that much rotation. And when you kind of get behind that one deep, that's where maybe some question marks start to rise. And the cornerbacks have played well. Jermod McCoy, a transfer from Oregon State, who's just a sophomore, and then Ricky Gibson III, who's a sophomore, who spent both years inside UT's program, have both been really solid. The star position, the nickelback, you lose your starter, Jordan Thomas, in the preseason, so they've had to kind of fiddle around there and see what's fit. It's been 50-50 between Christian Harrison and a true freshman, Boo Carter. And then at safety, Andre Turrentine's been really solid. Will Brooks had the big pick 6 against NC State, but I think there's still some questions about what he's going to do against SEC teams. And those are guys that are playing for the majority of the football game. Those are guys that aren't getting that rest that the defensive line, the linebacker position are afforded. And so that's where maybe once you get to the SEC play against Oklahomas, against the Georgias, the Alabamas, how is that going to fare? Is that going to be something that's going to come up negatively for Tennessee? But at the same time, if your defensive pass rush is getting to the quarterback super quick, then that covers up a lot of issues in your secondary. So I think at the end of the day, it'll work out and still be a positive defense for Tennessee. But if you have to nitpick and find an area of concern, it's that secondary.
I was talking to I do a high school football podcast too as well, and I was talking to one of the high school coaches down here in Dothan, and we were talking about that. And I said, but the best friend of a secondary is a great defensive line. If the quarterback is trying to avoid being put on the ground, it helps the DBs out a lot in that situation. About this Oklahoma matchup, and you mentioned it, and we know Tennessee and Oklahoma have a history over the last 20 years. They've had some regular season matchups, obviously SEC opener. For these teams, Tennessee going there to Oklahoma, and the Josh Heupel part of it, which I'm sure he's not going to play that up at all. As any coach, the only coach in college football that would play something like that would be Lane Kiffin. But outside, I don't think anybody else is going to do that. When you look at this, I'm just looking at Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold's a talented quarterback, but they have struggled running the ball. He's their leading rusher right now. They had to struggle win against Houston. Beat Tulane 34-19 last week. But when you look at this matchup with Tennessee going up against Oklahoma, what do you think are going to be some of the keys for Tennessee to come out with a victory?
I think what it's going to come down to is can Nico – well, let me say it like that. The only way I think Tennessee loses is if Nico has a poor game. Mm-hmm. I think Tennessee's defense matches up really well against a weak offensive line for Oklahoma, a poor run game. Jackson Arnold – I think he's a good quarterback, but he doesn't have a lot of weapons at receiver right now because that unit's banged up too. So I think Tennessee's defense is poised to have a really good game against Oklahoma and really shut down what they want to do on that side of the ball. So when you flip the coin, I think the only way Tennessee loses is if Nico just has a really bad game and turns the ball over and misses open throws, that maybe the crowd gets to him. There's some procedure penalties, things like that. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think the key to the game, kind of ironically, is just Nico plays fine. And as long as he reaches kind of a fine level where he's taking care of the ball, you have an open receiver, you hit him, you make the right reads on RPOs, and you get the ball to Dylan Sampson when you need to, you tuck it when you need to, you really just don't turn the ball over. I think Tennessee is going to be fine in this game. So I feel like usually when you're looking at kind of like a key to a game, it's like, yeah, well, you just need James Pierce Jr. to go off. You need Dylan Sampson to rush for over 100. For me in this game, it's more so if Nico looks the part, if Nico looks mature, like we think he will, and like I think he will, then Tennessee's going to be fine.
Yeah, and you look at Jackson Arnold's been sacked 9 times this year, so it seems like you got probably be a filling out process early on. You would think in this game, and Oklahoma they're going to play well defensively, I think. But like you said, if you can't do anything like Oklahoma, seems like they're going to have struggle with the home crowd's probably going to be the best thing going for them in this game because it will be the first real true road game Nico has had to go on. And, that's always a big deal when you go on the road at a place like Oklahoma.
But what helps with that too is, let's say Nico comes out the gates and he's not on fire, and maybe there's a 3-and-out, and then maybe not 3-and-out, but you pick up 1 first down, then you punt the ball again. What helps with that is when you look at the scoreboard and it's still 0-0, and the defense has your back, and the defense makes sure that you're not playing from a deficit early. So even if the moment is something that Nico has to kind of transition into as being a first-time road starter in the SEC in front of a crowd that's I expect to be electric, I think there's a chance that he still looks up at the scoreboard halfway through the first quarter. It's tied 0-0, and you kind of take a deep breath and go, we're fine. It's a brand new game. And then you go out, and then that's when you see the Heisman caliber Nico come out and things roll in Tennessee's favor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like Tennessee in the game. Obviously, I feel like you do too as well. So it's going to be a fun game to watch on TV for me on Saturday night. And it's going to be fun for anybody that's going to be there in Oklahoma for sure. And Ryan, this has been fun having you on the show, talking all things Tennessee Vols. If the listeners, viewers want to check out online, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter or X at Ryan T. Sylvia, and then check out VolReport.com, like you said, on the Rivals Network. We'll be in Norman, Oklahoma. My first time out in Norman, so I'm excited to kind of check another stadium off the bucket list, and it should be a really fun environment. But for coverage leading up to game day, for coverage on game day, and then for coverage all Tennessee athletics year round, we have you covered at VolReport.com.
All right. Yeah, everybody go check Ryan out. Great Vol coverage. And Ryan, appreciate the time, and hope we can do this again sometime down the road.
Yeah, thanks, Phillip.
All right, next up on the show, I'm joined by Tony Tsoukalas. He is the managing editor over at TideIllustrated, part of Rivals. And Tony, I appreciate you coming on. Look forward to talking Alabama football with you.
Yeah, it's a rare 2 bye week. Actually, I don't call it a bye week, Phillip, because it's not a bye week. A bye is something you earn in the playoffs. It is an open week, but you have 2 of them on the schedule this year, so it's nice to have a little early one where we normally have it around Halloween. We'll still have that one too, but it's a nice little break from the action this week for me.
Yeah, I like it when the calendar hits right, when we get 14 weeks, but when everybody gets 2 off weeks, because the season is longer, but not for the teams. It's just for us as fans and people who love the sport. It feels like we get more football, even though really we're getting the same amount of games, but just spread out more.
Also, it just allows you to recharge. It kind of allows you to maybe kind of take a step back and look at the team that you're interested in and see, okay, where are they after 3 games? Or, I guess in some people's case, this would be 4 games, right? But yeah, I mean, like it gives you a chance to kind of evaluate some stuff and also, I mean, it gives you a chance to watch more games. When I'm covering Alabama, I miss a lot of the games that are going on while I'm covering Alabama. So looking forward to just kind of watching some college football this week.
Yeah, absolutely. We get some more of them 11 a.m. Fox kickoffs. I mean, that can help you watch some primetime games.
Yeah, but then so I watched a little bit, but I was trying to see Madison a little bit. So I was going out to eat, and so I was catching some games. It's going to be different this weekend when I'm at home, just chilling in front of the TV, just watching, relaxing. not trying to get to a restaurant or a bar or something like that. Just relaxing and kind of just maybe sleeping in a little bit too.
There you go. There you go. I don't blame you on that one. That's usually my plan on Saturday mornings. I do not watch pregame shows because I usually don't get up till about 10, 11 o'clock on Saturday mornings. I get up just in time to watch the game day picks, and then I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I will make up a little bit early. I'll watch the picks. If I know I have to watch the show, I'll watch it. I'm a big English Premier League soccer fan, though. So if my Manchester United's playing, I'll wake up early for them. Sometimes, though, on some of those early games, I'm like half asleep. I'm falling back asleep while I'm watching. But yeah, it's I'm definitely gonna like the fact that I can just guilt-free sleep in this weekend.
Yeah, so hey, I'm sure the team too as well. They're looking forward to that awfully, especially having to make that trip to Wisconsin. 3-0, going into the year, we all saw Alabama obviously as a playoff contender, one of the top 4 SEC teams out there. Some people had different order where they might be, but still, what's probably the things you've learned the most about this Alabama team that you probably didn't know going into the year?
Yeah, the defense I think is a little bit more solid than maybe some people were giving credit for. I think Kane Womack's done a great job. You look at the 2 inside linebackers with Jahad Campbell and Deontay Lawson. I think everyone expected them to be good, but man, they are just so solid. I think that defensive line kind of lived up to what people thought was going to be too. You're seeing there wasn't necessarily a star on that defensive line, but you're maybe seeing one emerge. In LT Overton, the Texas A&M transfer, he was just amazing against Wisconsin. I think he had 5 or 6 pressures. He caused the fumble. He was everywhere. So you got a really solid front seven, and then I think that secondary is also a little bit. That was a red flag, but you look and I think the safety play from Malachi Moore and Keon Sabb, those 2 have been rock solid, and then you really haven't seen the holes or the inexperience come into play with like a Xavier Brown. I know he's a freshman, but he's a 5-star freshman, so you haven't had to maybe pay for your inexperience there. So I thought that the defense has been really encouraging. I will say though that Alabama hasn't faced really a quarterback that can test it in the secondary, so that might be something maybe it's just advantageous because I think now by the time they do start to play these quarterbacks, Carson Beck will be the first one next week. They will have 3 games under their belt, 4 weeks of the season under their belt, so maybe they'll seem less like freshmen, but they really haven't been tested like they will later on in the SEC schedule. There's some really good quarterbacks coming to town, or Alabama will have to travel to them too. So that's going to be tough, but I think the defense overall is the biggest thing I've learned. When you look at the offense, I think we all knew it was going to be a dynamic offense and an offense that could hit it big. I don't know if we've learned that it can be a consistent offense yet. And I think that's kind of what we're looking to see. And as good as the Wisconsin game was for Alabama, I still don't think you can classify this offense as an offense that can consistently move the ball down the field. It's one that can hit a home run. If you compare this offense to baseball, it'd be like a 250 hitter that hits like 40 home runs, So it's a productive player. It's a dangerous player, but it's one that strikes out too much. And so I think you want to get that average up if you're Alabama and be able to move the ball consistently, because I think those big plays are going to be limited. You go up against it. Once again, bringing up Georgia, but a team like that, they're not going to let you get 50 yards at a time. Probably. Maybe they will, but I think that counting on that is probably not the best plan. I think you need to start, maybe implementing more short yardage things, and maybe that will come when Alabama has to. But that's just the one thing we haven't really learned, just because they haven't really had to do that.
So the South Florida game was kind of like a pitcher's duel, and then in the 9th inning, Alabama hit 3 home runs.
Yeah, it's like if you want to just keep on with these baseball references, the Alabama got to the bullpen, and then they just hit a few home runs off the relievers. That's basically what happened, and that's the thing about this Alabama team is you can be controlling it and you can be frustrated, and all of a sudden, it's like Ryan Williams just spawns downfield and he's wide open, and Milrow's going to hit him. So I just don't know how much Ryan Williams is going to spawn against a Georgia or Tennessee or some of those better defenses that Alabama will face.
Yeah, and it was big for Alabama this week too. It's the offensive line. I think some people had some concerns after the South Florida game because there were instances in that game where they did put pressure on Jalen Milrow, but they had their starting five together against Wisconsin and played really, really well in the game. Run game, pass protection, all that stuff. How would you grade that unit after the Wisconsin game?
I think it looked pretty positive too, and there wasn't a lot of. I think there was 2 sacks in the game, but I don't even remember them. It's like it wasn't a case of where I don't think Jalen was running around for his life as much, and so you were able to see him kind of be able to do more. And they did a lot of designed runs. I think there was Jalen had 14 attempts, and I think all of his attempts were all of his rushing attempts were designed runs. It's not like he was having to scramble out of something and then run. I mean, they designed a lot of runs, and so that was something that they used. I think that it's still got a little bit of room to grow, but I think you're going to see an improved offensive line. I was really impressed with what I saw from Caden Proctor. A guy that struggled last year. I mean, he came, kind of progressed late in the year, but he came a long way, and he's a guy that could have been a little bit rusty after not playing for 2 weeks with that shoulder injury, and he seemed to first game Big Ten opponent on the road, he seemed like he didn't miss a step, so that's really good. I think that unit will get to gel a little bit more in practice over the next 2 weeks, and then they'll face their biggest test. But you got to be encouraged. And then another thing too, in terms of blocking, and I mentioned this on the TideIllustrated site today, on Tuesday, is the receivers. They're blocking really well. I mean, give them all the credit for getting open in those big plays, but you've got Kendrick Law, Jeremy Bernard, Ryan Williams. They're all blocking really well. Ryan Williams had the highest run blocking grade from Alabama against South Florida. And then against Wisconsin, Jeremy Bernard had the highest run blocking grade. And that's not of the receiving unit. That's, of the anyone, So, I mean, that's really encouraging when you look at it.
Yeah, and still overall just going up to Wisconsin. I mean, nobody, well, I ain't going to say nobody. Most people had Alabama favored to win that game. So Alabama winning was not a surprise. But 11 a.m. kickoff, early kickoff Central Time, what they're used to. Going up to Wisconsin, we always know that's a really good fan base up there. So it's going to be loud. But going, taking care of your business, 42-10. That's kind of like what a championship team does. It was never in doubt. They dominated throughout. It did not matter who the quarterback was for Wisconsin. It was probably going to be the same thing. And I think that says a lot about Kalen DeBoer, how he has this team going. Just, hey, let's just take care of business. And they did Saturday. Yeah.
And it was a good response to some of the problems that they had against South Florida. They didn't have a turnover against South Florida. They lost the turnover battle 3-0. And then now they won the turnover battle 3-0. I think that was a big thing. Kane Womack talks a lot about, we've got to, pressure the quarterback and create turnovers. And that's what they did against Wisconsin. Now, were they going against a lesser quarterback? Sure. I mean, I also think that it doesn't matter. Wisconsin still loses that game pretty convincingly with Tyler Van Dyke, but they didn't have him. And so Alabama took advantage of that too. But that's another case of, you didn't get affected by a changing quarterback. You just did business. It was pretty clean. There wasn't a lot of penalties. I think it was a real business-like approach, a business trip, I guess,
Yeah, if there was a little bit of the door cracking open for Wisconsin, it maybe was there toward the end of the first half. They moved the ball. They maybe could get a field goal or maybe a touchdown and get some momentum going second half. They missed a field goal, and then Alabama goes down the field, 2 plays, touchdown, 21-3. We knew it was over at halftime then. It was probably over before then.
Yeah. I mean, Alabama could have easily just ran out the clock, taking the lead into half, and then they were going to get the ball back. But it's an aggressive play. It's confidence, and you're taking advantage of what you do best, because that's what Alabama does. I mean, that's another thing too. I mean, you can criticize, or you can, and I've done it a lot, that this offense can't, sustain drives. But at the end of a 2-minute offense, this is a great, team. If you're trailing by 5 and you need a touchdown to win the game, this is the kind of offense that can do that. It can get down the field in a hurry. So, they took advantage of that, and then they just killed off the game, and I think that was big. Because, you keep that game a little bit closer going to the half. Maybe Wisconsin gets a little bit of, anything can happen after the break, and then Wisconsin can get back into the game. Maybe they make some adjustments. But if you kill them off like that, it's almost hard to even change anything or even readjust if you're Wisconsin, because you've just been, gutted right before the half. And it's just the momentum swing right there was so crushing for them. So credit to Alabama for being aggressive in that situation and kind of getting it done.
Yeah, it's always devastating. You think, okay, we're about to be within a score, at least a score within this team, and then now they're up 21-3, and just like I said, devastating. Jalen Milroe, of course, that was a conversation going into the year. Kalen DeBoer coming in as head coach, what he's done with quarterbacks. I think a lot of people agree Jalen Milroe is a great athlete quarterback when it comes to running. He's a playmaker that way, and he does great with the deep ball. But I think some people go into the year still, okay, how is he going to be with the other stuff, the intermediate pass, being just a more truer form of a quarterback, kind of what we've seen with Kalen DeBoer before. How would you grade Jalen Milroe so far on that?
I mean, it's tough. I think that he's gotten better at some things, at some recognition. And, I think, the coaches yesterday talked about, the way he's able to, call his offensive line, set up blocks before the snap, and, with as many, design runs as they had, he really set that up pretty well. I think, if you look at the Ryan Williams touchdown, that beautifully thrown pass, you could say, oh, that's nothing new. We've seen Jalen Milroe deliver the deep ball in the past. But I think, if you look that play, you break it down, I think Jalen probably sees that they're in a cover one. He knows he's going to have Ryan Williams there, and he knows that that's where he's got to go with it. I think that shows some maturity. I'm not sure he was probably seeing those things as well or as, quickly last year as he is now. I think he needs to improve in his intermediate game. I don't think they're ever really going to be strong. I don't think that's what he does. And I think just you can blindly say, oh, he's just got to get this intermediate game. I just don't know if that's what he is as a quarterback, and he does need to improve it, but I don't think it's ever going to be a strength of his game. I think, a little bit, I think he's going to continuously improve, but he gets to a point where you are what you are. He's probably the second most athletic player in college football. I think I'd give it to Travis Hunter, and then I'd give it to Jalen Milroe, and so he can do a lot of things that even if you know where he's going, you can't get there, so some of those sweeps to the outside, it's just tough to stop him. And then, if you cheat too much, he's going to beat you over the top because he's got a great arm and really great deep ball accuracy. You'd like to see him maybe hit some of those underneath routes more, or maybe, some of those intermediate routes. And I think he can improve, even if it's not a strength of his. I think he can improve, but that's still a work in progress. The question is this going to work against better defenses? And we're just going to have to see, because I think, so far you said, oh, it's not going to work, or it's not going to work as much against Wisconsin. Well, it worked just as well against Wisconsin as it has in the first two games. So you would say it's not going to work against Georgia, and I don't think it's going to work as well. But let's just see, I guess. Let's just see what Alabama is able to do on offense. And let's give Jalen some credit there, because he's been able to score touchdowns, and that's the name of the game. There's no extra points for scoring a touchdown in 10 plays rather than 2.
Yeah.
So give it to him, and he's beaten Georgia before. So I guess you just look at it and you let him prove himself on the field and know that he's going to get better and better. But he's been a touchdown machine. It's really kind of hard to fault him too much. He's on pace to get over 50 touchdowns this year. So I think you just probably start scheming around it. I had a talk. I know you're an Auburn guy, Phillip, and to a certain extent, you do a little bit of 2013 Auburn with Nick Marshall, and I think Jalen's got more arm talent than Marshall has, but you do some of that stuff where you do some read options. You have maybe a Kendrick Law, kind of go out as a blocker and then release, and if they go after Milroe, he just floats it over the top to Kendrick Law. I could see that kind of stuff happening. I think you almost had one of those plays. If you look, it didn't develop, but I think, if you go back and look at the Wisconsin play, it was a run to Jalen Milroe to his right, and Kendrick Law was there. And I think they just had it more covered. But I could see in that situation in the future where Kendrick Law kind of releases downfield and he just bloops a pass to him for 50 yards, because they over pursued on Milrow. So there's some stuff you could look back. I think there's some room for that later on. Maybe that's some of the wrinkles that they'll throw out when they get into SEC play. But yeah, I mean, that's probably the longest way to answer your question. But I think, there's some progression there. But I think at the same time, I think Alabama's just going to have to play to Jalen's strengths.
Let's figure out which one of these receivers is going to be a Sammy Coates then if you're going to go with 2013 Nick Marshall.
Well, I think they don't have anybody as big as Sammy Coates, but I think, if you're looking for a big go-to guy, it's got to be Ryan Williams, right?
That's true. That's true. My big thing, this will be a quick tangent and I'll move on. The big thing about Sammy Coates, I believe he played in 2A football. So just imagine that 2A teams were having to deal with that. It was 7A hadn't, I think 7A hadn't started yet, but yeah, that was a problem for a lot of high school teams.
I'm going to get in trouble from the Alabama listeners for bringing up Auburn, but
Hey, it's fine. It's fine. As an Auburn writer, I'm probably gonna get in trouble for having an Alabama writer on my show. So it's all good, man. It's all good. I think most Alabama and Auburn, either people that cover the teams or fans, the reasonable people, are cool with both sides. It's the other part of it, And I just got in trouble for saying that. So, and if y'all want to hit me up, the Twitter handle's on the screen. If you're listening to the podcast, it's at P Jordan SEC. Love to talk to you. Talking about receivers. Ryan Williams. I mean, can the guy just catch a short little 5-yard pass? Every time he touches the ball, it's going for 40 yards or a touchdown, long yards. I mean, he had the 47-yard catch in this one. I mean, he's 10 catches on the year, 285 yards, averaging 28.5 yards a catch, 4 touchdowns. I mean, talk about Jalen Milrow, how many touchdowns he could have this year. I mean, how many is Ryan Williams going to have if he keeps up with this pace?
Is he going to break the freshman record by Calvin Ridley at Alabama? I think it's like 1,040 something yards. He's on pace to do it. He's something, man. He's and you're hearing the stories that he's in practice. He's doing a lot of the stuff that Julio Jones did. I mean, obviously they're totally different receivers, but in terms of just the overall impressive athleticism during practice, he's getting those kind of things, and he's that kind of receiver. He's a guy that if he can stay healthy for the 3 years, and I say 3 years because there's no way. I mean, he's going to be a top 10 pick. If he can stay healthy for that time, he has a chance to be the best receiver in Alabama history. You knock on wood from an Alabama perspective on that because, health, he's going to need a quarterback play. But, he has that kind of talent, I guess, when you look at it. And so, He is special, and he can do everything too. I mean, you see the long passes, but I think one of those touchdowns was on a kind of short dig route where I think he ran most of it in, so he can do that too. And then, like I said, he can run block. He's not the biggest guy, but he's good and he's quick and he's got the technique down. And so he's not just he can do some of the dirty work, and then a lot of times you don't see that from the freshman. And so he's a really polished player and I know SEC, fans are tired of hearing that, but for a 17-year-old kid, right? I mean, it is kind of worth noting that, he should be in high school right now, and he's playing like a sophomore or junior in college.
Yeah, he is. It's been amazing what he's been able to do. Look, you mentioned I cover Auburn. I'm just going to say this. The state may have 2 receivers in that draft going to top 10, top 15. Cam Coleman on the other side too.
Yeah, so, and can you imagine? I mean, well, I don't know if Auburn has anyone that can throw to either of them, but can you imagine if they were both on the same team, which a lot of people thought they might end up being. But Cam Coleman's also great. It's going to be fun watching those 2 guys go up against each other the next few years.
It says a lot about just the in-state talent for Alabama at that position, that those 2 guys and and others as well coming out as good as they are. I mean, obviously you look at them too, without a doubt most talented freshman receivers in the country. I mean, if not the best 2 or most talented there is.
Yeah. I mean, Alabama's always had really good talent though. I mean, you look at some of the receivers Alabama's produced. I mean, Julio Jones was an Alabama kid. Henry Ruggs was an Alabama kid. So that Alabama's had been able to develop talent, especially at the wide receiver position. So it's not too much of a surprise. But yeah, it is good to see. And I think, one of the other things too is people look at this class, this upcoming class, I guess this 2025 class, and say that, oh, it's a down year for Alabama. Well, you just took away Ryan Williams from this class. I mean, like, he would definitely be the best player in this class if he had stayed around. So it's not as much of a down year. You just took, a top 5 player out of the class of Alabama. So yeah,
I'll tell you who's happy he's not playing high school football. The high school coaches down that we're going up against Saraland. They're happy.
Well, Saraland coaches are sad right now.
Yeah.
They'd like to have him win Mr. Football for a third straight year. But
yeah, absolutely. And I've kept you a few minutes longer than I said I would. But real quickly, of course, Alabama's off this Saturday. Georgia's off as well. But looking up to that matchup on the 28th, just we're sitting here like a week and a half before they play. Just what are going to be what is a key for Alabama moving forward to come away with a victory in that game?
Yeah, I mean, they're just going to have to move this ball. First of all, they're going to have to get in the end zone against a Georgia defense that hasn't allowed a touchdown in 3 games. So that's the first step. But I think they're going to have to sustain drives. I mean, who knows? I mean, they could theoretically score in bunches against this Georgia defense, but they're not going to probably be able to do that. So I think that the key is going to be getting that ground game going. Whether it's design runs with Miller or whether it's getting the ball to Justice Haynes and Jam Miller. And look, Justice Haynes is averaging 8 point something yards to carry, and Jam's averaging 9 point something yards to carry. So the running backs have been great. I mean, Alabama's been able to move the ball on the ground. So doing that, opening up those plays downfield, kind of, punishing Georgia and moving the ball on the ground, and then maybe opening up some of those deep balls. I think that's kind of the name of the game for Alabama. Ideally, you'd like to hit on some of those intermediate passes. I'm not sure if it's just going to magically pop up against the best defense in college football. So I think maybe you get a little creative, work in some screens, work in some of those, those 2013 Auburn concepts I was talking about, where you can really, make defenses get caught in 2 minds. I think you just take advantage of Jalen Milroe's athleticism and then just continue to play good defense. I do think that, if Georgia's without Tate Ratledge, that's going to be a loss. Alabama's defensive line's been pretty good. So is Georgia going to be able to move the ball against Alabama? You can't really, everyone talks about Georgia's defense and it is great, but Alabama's defense has been pretty good too,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's going to be a battle. And so just really kind of, a lot of it's going to be one on the line of scrimmage. And I think it's going to be who's going to be able to kind of consistently move the ball on the ground and open up stuff for their passing games. So we'll just have to see. But I think it's going to be a close game. And I think from Alabama perspective, it's going to be in Bryant-Denny. So that's going to help. But this is going to be a tough one. I think most people would pick Georgia. I think even I would pick Georgia right now. But I don't think it's going to be – I think it's going to be a really close game and a really fun one to watch.
Yeah, it's gonna be like a heavyweight fight. It's gonna be interesting when these two teams get together. In a week and a half, we get to enjoy this weekend's games first before that one comes around. And Tony, I enjoyed it as always having you on the show, talking all things Alabama football. If the listeners and viewers want to check you out, where can they find you?
Yeah, it's Tony_Tsoukalas on X, or you can go follow us at TideIllustrated on X. Go ahead and follow Jack Knowlton as well. And just really check out our site. It's a great site. We got a really cool message board. We got recruiting. We've got football. We'll have basketball in a couple months. So it is a great place to be. So please check us out.
All right, go check them out over at TideIllustrated. And Tony, again, appreciate the time, and I look forward when we get to do this again.
Yeah, for sure.
High school football season, and that means the Dothan Wolves are back on 96.9, The Legend. Every Thursday night, check out the Jed Kennedy Coaches Show with Jerry Coleman and Ken Lambert as they sit down with Dothan Wolves head coach Jed Kennedy about the previous game and preview the upcoming opponent. If you missed the Jed Kennedy Coaches Show, you can check out the podcast at wiregrassdailynews.com or go to your favorite podcast catcher and just type in Dothan High School Football. And, of course, every Friday night, pregame starts at 6:45 and kickoff is at 7 for all the Dothan Wolves football action. All right, once again, thanks to Tony and Ryan for coming on the show. That's it for today. We'll be back Friday with a special edition of the podcast, a bonus edition. Find a podcast on all the platforms. Know where to find it. Hope everybody has a great Wednesday. Till next time. Bye-bye.